Zen Master Dae Bong received Dharma transmission in April of 1999 and began practicing with Zen Master Seung Sahn in 1977. He became a monk in 1984. Before studying Zen, he worked as a counselor in a hospital and a welder in a shipyard, building nuclear submarines, I understand. He's practiced and taught extensively throughout the United States, Europe, and Asia, and is currently at Musangsa.
I love hearing people, especially Dharma brothers and sisters, talk about Dharma. It feels kind of funny to be up here talking about the bone of Zen Master Seung Sahn's teaching, because there's hundreds of his students who could do that. In 1999, Dae Sangsin was interviewed by a TV station in Korea. They came to Haengja, and one of the questions he was asked was, "You have been more successful at spreading Korean Buddhism around the world than any other Korean Sanim. How did you do that?" And he said, every country has its own culture, and every country loves and is proud of its culture. If I only taught Korean Buddhist culture, I would have very few students. I teach the bone of Buddhism, then slowly, each country will make its own Buddhist culture. Just like China did, the Tibetans, the Koreans, and onward. So he really understood, and he said to us many times, he teaches the bone of Buddhism, the real core points. And it's also important to understand where he's coming from. Korean Buddhism has certain characteristics just like the Buddhism of other countries. And you can get a feeling for this if you read the book by Musang, who was a student of Zen Master Seung Sahn's, 1,000 Peaks. And recently I had to read it 2 or 3 more times to give a talk about the history of Korean Buddhism. And he really captures some of the main things that go on, that have developed. Not only the outer forms, and you could say the teachings, but also how Buddhism interacted with the society. And that, to me, that was very interesting, because we all have societies we are interacting with. And they're different from each other, and they're also different from the societies of Korea, 1,700 years ago, 1,000 years ago, even 10 years ago. And to have some sense of how Buddhism interacts with society is very valuable in being able to develop the expedient means that connect with people. But the bone is the same, always. Korean Buddhism's character, since we're here in Korea, one thing is it's very syncretic. When Buddhism came a little bit from India, but mostly from China into Korea 1,700 years ago, it was basically seen as a practice and teaching that could protect the country and protect the royalty. And when people began to ordain and go to China, those people started to bring back some of the deeper teachings in the doctrines. And soon 5 doctrine schools appear, each one kind of based on different sutra. Also, the first Korean monk who really brought back the teachings of Bodhidharma to Korea was a student of the 4th patriarch, the 4th ancestor in China. And if you go to the 4th ancestor's temple, there's a pagoda. It was locked when we were there, but you could look in, and there's statues representing his great disciples, and one of them is this Korean monk. I forget his name, but he came back to Korea and didn't really found any school or any group of students that continued very much. It could have been that at that time, the teachings that we get through Bodhidharma, through all the masters since, didn't really resonate with the society. It could have been his personality that didn't resonate with, being charismatic or attracting people. Maybe a century or so later, monks started to come back who had studied with Majo and his descendants. And that was before this understanding of Chinese Zen as 5 schools appeared. Although they relate, they say, Lin Chi school, Rinzai, or this school, or that school, that happened more than a century after those teachers lived and died. Then people said, oh, our teaching comes from this. We're that school, or this. So Korean Zen is essentially straight out of the 6th patriarch, which means using anything to point to our true nature, which I think is why, or doesn't matter why, but Zen Master Seung Sahn, as Zen Master Hae Moon said, Barry said, his emphasis always was on our direction, developing a vow. And Zen Master Seung Sahn, she also, when I talk with her, at least is always talking to me about vow and try mind. And the one thing we carry from life to life is our vow and our try mind. So if our vow is filled with anger at somebody, some resentment, then that takes us into our next life and the circumstances we appear in. But if our vow is to understand ourselves and moment to moment help all beings, that carries into the next life and determines circumstances, etc., that we're in and our approach to those circumstances. So I think it was a little frustrating sometimes for people during the first 10 years or so when Dae Sahn was teaching in the West that he didn't talk a lot about technique. He talked very much about direction. Why are you doing something? How do you keep your mind just now? But it's so wonderful because then there's no separation from formal practice and everyday life. It's just formal practice is a very simple situation. So it's really easy, well, maybe not so easy, but it's easier to reflect back on ourselves and see our minds, what kind of thing we're creating in our mind. It's more difficult maybe when you're at work because there's, a lot of our everyday life activities blend with our desire. But if you're just sitting, bowing, and chanting, you can see that pretty quickly. So I'd say the original bone of this teaching is our direction. Also, he gave us incredible way of talking about the Dharma. It's like all the sutras boiled down into these simple everyday expressions. He came up with a lot of them, and a lot of them sort of disappeared, but you all know the ones that remained. Just do it. Which is, number 1 is only go straight, don't know. Then put it all down. He loved that one. I remember once we were all with him, and we were saying to him, sir, can't you say, let go? It's so much nicer to put it all down. It sounds like some Western religion teaching of repress yourself. And he would say, it's not repress yourself. It's not push it all down. We know what happens when you push it all down. Either you explode, which happens many times with people, almost every day in America, or you get sick from pushing down this energy. Just expressing it is a problem, pushing it down is a problem. but if we let it go, it's not a problem. So we said, sir, can't you say let it go? And he said, yeah, put it all down. So we have to see the mind action that's in the words. I met him in 1977 and did 3 retreats. And as they said, I was working building a nuclear submarine, a weapon. And I was so happy to find the teaching and direction that really resonated with me. And at some point during the 3rd retreat in 6 weeks I did with him, he kind of shocked me with something. And I went into the room where he was, and it was interesting, of course, because my hand was like this, and then finally I opened the door, and he's sitting in a chair. He says, come. And I came and stood in front of him, and just stood there, and he said, talk. And I said, teach me more. And he goes, only go straight, don't know, okay? Only don't know, okay? Okay. Go. So I went out of the room, and as I was shutting the door, I thought, and this is the exact words, what does that mean? And then I went to reach for the handle again, opened the door. He looked at me, and I shut the door, and into my head, boom, Kwan Boso, Kwan Boso, Kwan Boso. So I just continued practicing the rest of that day, no matter what was happening, chanting, on the way home, getting up early, going to the shipyard, still chanting. And at 10 a.m., actually my job was the shield tank of the nuclear reactor, welding it in. It just hit me very strongly. It even knocked me off my bench. I'm doing something horrible, and I'm not happy. And I quit. Just that little medicine of only go straight, don't know. Okay. I quit, and 2 days later, I moved into the Providence Zen Center. So we can use all the words. Everybody can use the words. But can we find the mind inside it? What's that really about? And that's also don't know. When people ask me, what's don't know? I just say, correct. They don't know, right? That's it, right there. But even we get a taste of it, very hard to maintain it and have it go in deeply. That's our job. And it doesn't matter what your situation in life is. As De Kwang Sanim said, anybody here can avoid life and death? So we're all in the same situation. And the bone is that it touches deeply. Another of his favorite phrases was, don't make anything. That's an amazing phrase. I still chew on it kind of in here. It's just amazing. It's like, time to talk, okay. I sat over there and they said, sit here. Okay, sit here. Don't make anything. Yeah, take that home and see what it's like to digest. And the other one, of course, is just do it. And we can all talk about what is just do it. So he gave us these amazing teaching phrases. It's like roadmap or GPS pointing somewhere. But if we don't use them and digest them, it's like standing under a road sign that says, Busan that way, and thinking that where I'm standing looking at the road sign is Busan. It's the same thing. So practice. Also with practice, Seung Sahn did something that was amazing. He was a great teacher. He really got something. I think that's one reason so many people who met him are still practicing. They saw that. What is that he realized? We have it, yeah, but what is that? So we had a great teacher who could demonstrate with his life, not just in the verbal teaching, not just in setting up the way we'll practice, and not just in the kongans, but in daily life. I decided at some point I just wanted to follow him closely. And even though I didn't spend, sometimes he sent me to Paris for like 3 years, and then Berkeley, and then Cambridge, and then told me to go down where Musangsa is now. We weren't physically together all the time, but I felt that I was always getting somehow, even now, it's so weird, his Dharma, because it's like a live energy. It's a vow, it's a direction. And he could do it in everyday life. Everybody had different experiences with him. Some people kind of stood up to him, and that was their experience. And however he responded, I felt myself that it was the relationship I had with him that I'd learned through. Not that he was always right or he knew what I should do, but it was the relationship. So all this beautiful Dharma teaching and practice style he gave us really became like DNA, I believe, for him. And it can for us too. And that's then everyday life interactions with people you meet will bring it out naturally, even without using any of these Dharma words. But he really refined the teachings of Buddhism, the whole history of it, into very simple phrases, ways of practicing, and ways of even organizing ourselves as communities, residential and non-residential. That if we, and you want to learn, you want to follow it, you want to digest it, you want to become it, you can get basically what they'd say, teaching is Buddha's mind, but you can find your own nature and then live it out, whatever our circumstances are. One time I asked him, I don't know how many years ago it was, when I was, basically he had asked me to come to Asia and help him in Asia in 1993. So I've been here, of course I ran away twice for about a year each time, but I kept coming back. And so I don't mind it if somebody runs away. Maybe they'll digest something and come back, or maybe they'll digest something and just find the Dharma where they are. But I asked him, how do we teach in Asia? And he said, same as everywhere. And I said, yeah, I know that, but Western Buddhism is about 100 years old. But in Asia, Buddhism is 2,000 years old. Then he said, very important, make 3 things clear. What is Hinayana Buddhism? What is Mahayana Buddhism? And what is Zen Buddhism? That's 1. And that's right in the compass of Zen. If you get the thin version before all his Dharma talks are put together, you can see Hinayana Buddhism, there's 3 insights: impermanence, suffering, and non-self. Mahayana Buddhism, there's 6 insights. Zen Buddhism, if you cut off your thinking, that's your true nature. So you can, if you find that you need to talk about these things, the bone of each branch of Buddhism is right there in the compass of Zen. And you can just say, well, the 3 insights of Hinayana Buddhism, the 3 practices of Hinayana Buddhism, the 6 insights of Mahayana Buddhism, the 6 paramitas, and the insight of Zen and the practice of Zen. So that's the first thing he said, make each of those clear. And he gave it was a wonderful thing giving us those, because I was starting on this earlier, but I veered off. The way Zen was taught in Korea the last 100 years or so didn't necessarily include any of that. It was simply, you're given a big question, and you keep it, and if you think you got something, there's no formal interviews. Then, if you think you got something, you went to a Zen master and saw whether it's really clear or not. That was it. So Zen koans were just to help you get a big enlightenment and to check out whether you had enlightenment or not. It didn't necessarily connect with everyday life at all. Very good for monks and nuns whose lives used to be more simple. Now, monks and nuns have handphones and computers, and we had to learn, Jinsen had to learn the legal words of Korean language, legal words, medical words. You know, it can also be complicated. Family life's simpler. But then, if you just stayed up in the mountains, lived in a temple, you know, people had to walk to the temple, then this kind of teaching with koans might work. But for people in everyday life, it didn't bear fruit very well. And I can see when older people in Korea come, they kind of got stuck on that technique. Everything was get the hole in one, you know, get your hwadu, your big question, break through and understand everything. And he didn't teach us that way. He was giving us the fertilizer of all of Buddha's teachings, the most important stuff, all of it directed towards how to practice also. Then he said, second important thing to make clear, you know, this is in answer to my question, how do we teach in Asia? He said, what is meditation? What is wisdom? Samadhi and prajna. And we have very good ways of pointing out what is meditation, what is wisdom. You know, especially the people who practice directly with him, you know, heard this all the time in short talks. You know, many kinds of meditation, Christian meditation, yoga meditation, and many kinds of Buddhist meditation, fly in the sky meditation, clear light meditation. Zen meditation means when you're doing something, just do it. It's so beautiful. No separation between any kind of formal practice, everyday life, even going to the market and interacting with people there. So how do we talk about meditation? Wisdom. What is wisdom? Wisdom isn't something we carry around in our head like knowledge that you get in schooling. Wisdom is becoming one with the situation, the direction of don't know and how help. That's wisdom when we have it. Then number 3, make substance, truth, and function clear. That's the way he would talk about wisdom. And he broke it down for us. And he didn't make that up. During Majo's time, they talked about essence and function, subject and function. And again, all Korean monks study this commentaries on the Sutra of Perfect Enlightenment by a great Korean monk in the 1300s, Kwan. The Chinese also study this. And he talks about substance and function. Now, I don't know because I never asked Dae Nim, but he put in what we call truth. And in my experience, working with people and teaching, why did he do that? Okay? It's a kind of function. It's a very simple, natural function. See clear, hear clear, smell clear, taste clear, feel clear. You know, the sky's blue, trees green, the carpet's red, ceiling's mostly brown. Because people don't do that now. Even the moment, the less than second of seeing something, opinion appears. And that colors how we perceive things and then colors what we do about it. So we have to retrain our bodies to see clear without shooting in our opinions about it. And that really has an effect when somebody's talking with you. because so fast our opinion appears, we don't get what's really going on. At some point when I came, there were already 6 Zen centers, East Coast, West Coast, and there were groups in other cities, and Sansanim was traveling all the time. And I remember, I was just sort of there. I didn't really ever think about what the directors are doing, what they decided. I was more focused on, my own ridiculous self-creations. But I remember people were asking Sansanim once, we're all understand ourselves in world peace. But already, after about 5-6 years, East Coast Zen centers and West Coast Zen centers in America are fighting. So some people asked him, why is that? And Dae Sansanim said, West Coast people have many opinions, but they don't hold them strongly. East Coast people have very few opinions, but they hold them very strongly. That's all he said. He knew how to work with West Coast people. He knew how to work with East Coast people. If we could see ourselves clearly, then that already means the karma is less controlling and we can slowly harmonize. So this see clear, hear clear is not a small thing. There's no way we'll function with wisdom if we're still letting our opinion mind intrude on the experience of our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, mind. So I think that's why he put that in there, because he saw we don't see clear. I mean, literally, we don't see the value in, the carpet's red. We were doing a Zoom program and somebody talked about loneliness. And I kind of surprised myself. And I said, well, here we are, the carpet's red. You're never alone. His clothes are gray. But we don't take the time to feel the fullness of that. If we do, then the next step function is can be natural if our direction is clear and we really keep a don't know mind about this I. We see this I appear. Then number 3, he said, make clear. Oh, function. Okay, that's the third one. Substance, truth, function. And in our Kongan style, the teacher can see what's clear, what's not, and then point us to or shove it in our face where we're stuck. And that gives us something to work on. Just like the sand goes into the oyster, irritates it, and becomes a pearl. Same as that. Then he didn't say this part, but what are the components of function? Correct situation, correct relationship, correct function. So even if you don't know anything of what's going on, you can, what am I doing right now? Is it correct situation, correct function, correct relationship? You can learn to self-correct moment to moment. So he gave us this stuff, but it's up to us to have it become ours. Like literally in your cells. And you could, from my experiences, I could see it in Seung Sahn. I mean, literally. Once he had flown in from Korea, so overnight flight into LA, and then that night, the Korean people at the temple were talking all their problems and everything, so he hardly slept at all. The next morning, we have a 3-day retreat. So he does bowing and chanting, sitting and chanting in Marka. And then at 9 a.m., then he took a nap. And if you're really, real tired and you take a nap, sometimes when you wake up, it's really hard to wake up. So I was the first interview at 9 a.m. I went in and bowed. He asked me some kongan, I don't know what. I gave him the answer, this, that. And then my homework was the Doksan carrying the bowls. The second question, what did Amdu whisper in the master's ear? So he gave it to me, and I was reading it, and I stopped right after it said, Amdu whispered in the master's ear. The master was relieved. So I stopped, and then normally he would ask me, what did Amdu whisper? And there was no sound, and when I looked up, he had fallen asleep. And this all happened within fractions of a second. He suddenly woke up, and his whole body that I could see, one of these low-cut, long underwear, so his chest, his face, his neck, all became red with embarrassment. And in almost the same instant, if you've seen The Exorcist, it's similar to that. At the end, the priest is like, grabs the girl and is just like, take me, take me. And suddenly he looks like the demon, and then he shakes it off and goes out the window because he knows he can't keep the demon out. Sansanim didn't have that problem, but in an instant, all the color became normal. And very naturally, he asked me, what did Amdu whisper in the master's ear? And I gave some ridiculous answer, and I went back and I just cried the rest of the sitting. The fresh energy of the completeness of his response. And it was all correct. And it had no checking. Embarrassment, he had this mouth that was sort of crumpled like you see in cartoons. And in just an instant, all clear and talking in a normal voice. So the teaching existed right in the very body. And so our practice is not separate from our body. You don't have to be like that. We have to attain ourselves, okay? And if we have the correct direction, everybody is a Buddha. Even the people who give us a hard time or maybe one day kill us. It's just natural process. That is the whole world's single flower. Okay. Find the bone and get it.